Today on Brick House, a big bucket of plumbing worms. Hello, welcome aboard Brick House. This video is about one little plumbing project, a burst 41-year-old copper water tubing, and how that little tubing now turns into a big bucket of worms because every other piece of plumbing that you look at surrounding the project then falls apart. Who would have ever thought that I would need all these extra supplies? What started this whole plumbing project was down here underneath the galley sink. Both of these red tubes just the other day were copper. Brick House is 42 years old, so it was no big surprise that the hot water pipe finally let go and was just flooding all over the place. I just happened to have a coil of PEX, P-E-X, which stands for polyethylene cross-linked. That's the type of polyethylene that they use for making this water tubing. I happened to pick that up in an island called Mayotte, and we had it on board, so now that we're here in Tanzania, I was able to break it out and run new tubing. The problem is, even in Mayotte and here in Tanzania, they don't have the proper fittings that I need to make the connections. That seems impossible, but so far I haven't been able to find them. Way in the back here in the quarter berth underneath the bunk is the hot water tank and the main connections for all of the plumbing. So this used to be, of course, copper, and there is a copper pipe extended down here. These are both the hot water pipes, and I was able to cut the pipe and leave about a 3-inch extension to slip the PEX over the copper extension, clean it up, and use 5200 and several clamps to clamp it down. I waited 24 hours before fully clamping it down, and so far we have no leaks. I feel very lucky. Although the copper tubing up here, which is connected directly to the hot water tank, has a patina on it, it's still in very good solid condition. It's the copper tubing that was resting on the floor that had been deteriorated and caused a problem. And now that I'm down and way back in here, I can see that this nylon drain is very deteriorated and it's just dripping in the slightest. So it has to be taken out and changed. And that's the way plumbing goes with me. If I do one little job, everything around it falls apart, and now I'm in for days of work, unexpected work. So I just happened to have a barbed connection that would fit inside of the PEX, and I could clamp in place with 2 or maybe 3 clamps. And that was perfect for making the connection from the water hose from the faucet. However, when I went to connect to the cold water line coming from the faucet, that nut from the faucet just disintegrated. And so another bucket of worms. Rather than trying to fix the hose from the faucet, we just decided to get a whole new faucet and another bucket of worms. Yeah, so now I can move on to the head repairs, make those connections, and what a surprise, another big disaster. There was just the tiniest drip at the handle shutoff for the sink drain. So when I went to check the handle and move it just a little bit, it broke off in my hand. Oh, geez. So put a bung on the outside, take the valve off. This valve is only about 8 years old. We've had valves on here that were like 35 years old and never had a problem with them. And we changed them just because they were so old. So definitely don't buy Chinese-made valves. So now the big problem is trying to find the same size valve here in Tanzania. So now, along with the shutoff valve at the through hull, we have a big tremendous leak at the connections going up to the sink. The PEX to the copper joint is just fine, so everything above this point has to now be replaced. So we left to go into the big city with our long list of valves and parts and things and the need for a new faucet at the galley sink.
Hakuna Hakuna Matata.
How is it? Hakuna Matata? Hakuna Matata. Okay. Easy for them to say. They haven't been working on my plumbing project. But also in Swahili, safari, that's a new word for me, means journey.
You want to take my ride?
You move.
So we called Uber for a tuk-tuk, or for a little more money, you can get a car. But tuk-tuks are a lot more fun. So we walk into this first store. They don't have any through-hole shutoffs to help us out. They don't have any of the fittings that we need. The only thing that would be close that they have is hanging on the wall, and they've never had anything like that in stock, and they're not willing to cut the sample off of the wall, even though they have no use for it. So onward we push. Rather than calling Uber again, we take the first tuk-tuk that comes along, and he wants 5,000 shillings to take us where we want to go. And we negotiate him down to 3,000 shillings, which would be about 44 cents more than what we paid our first tuk-tuk driver. But that's okay. This is a total amount of $1.32. But I hold the money out in front of him to make sure that he and I both agree on the amount, because far too many times these tuk-tuk drivers are the same as taxi cab drivers in New York City, Suva, Fiji, Madagascar, or anywhere else in the world. You agree on a price, you get to where you're going, then all of a sudden they have raised eyebrows as though you're not giving them enough money. So when that happens nowadays, after we already agreed and we hold out the money, I just give them what we agreed on and then walk away. There's nothing more to talk about. Thank you. Have a good day. So we go into the most promising hardware store and go through our whole list of the parts that we need, and unfortunately this man shakes his head more no than yes. And so the only thing left to do is to check a box of stainless steel hose clamps with the magnet and make sure that the screw that tightens down the hose clamp is not magnetic, so that these are suitable for use on a sailboat. Good to go. And off to the next door. Hopefully we can get a faucet just like this one for the galley sink. So we thought we'd stroll around the only upscale mall in Dar es Salaam. Now all we need is a new faucet like this one for the galley. So I go down all of these faucets that are on display, and what a nice surprise. Most of them are stainless steel, and this one will do. In Tanzania, it's a 3-position handshake. You start out normal, go up high, and then back down to the normal position again. Unless you're dealing with international businessmen on a much different scale, then it would just be a conventional 1-position handshake. So we finally got back to the boat, and I could get back to work, and all I could do with the shutoff valve was clean up the broken handle area on the valve body and then fill it up with epoxy glue. Wait 24 hours and then put it back in place. So it'll function just fine. There won't be any leaks, but we certainly will have a new valve on order. And of course there was a leak at one joint underneath the sink, but that was easy to fix. It just took a couple O-rings of spacers in there, and these O-ring packages are invaluable. They come in metric or imperial. I'll just run through a couple of things here to show how I cut pipes, glued things together, and was able to run through some of these long, difficult reaches underneath the floor of our boat to get that tubing through. To cut the tubing, use this little tubing cutter. You just open it up enough to slide the tubing in, and then just tighten it down a bit until it's not real snug, but not loose at all, because it has to cut. So just a little snug. You'll get a feel for it. Give it a turn. I'll give it 2 turns, and then tighten it a little more and give it some more turns. I mean, it's not even a 1/16 of a turn that I'm giving it. And then it all comes undone with a nice perfect circle. Sometimes on larger tube cutters there'll be a little thing that you can pop out. It's like a wedge shape you can put inside the tubing and twist it to help clean up any sharp points. And then to prepare the tubing for the pecs to be glued and clamped on, I took 220 grit paper and sand the heck out of it. I want to get all the old deterioration of the copper off. and then followed it up with 400 grit paper, and then I used acetone on everything to make sure that there's no grease. But this way there would be a nice tooth for the 5200 to stick. Although 5200 does not stick very well, or if at all, to the PEX, it'll act as a filler for any voids that might be around the tubing PEX join. Another way of cutting is to use the Dremel tool, which I had to do way down inside the aft cabin, by the water heater. There was a couple of places I just couldn't get that tubing cutter in place. 3M adhesive 5200 fast cure is what I used to make the join before clamping tightly. By the end of the day, after running the hot and cold tubing to the galley, and then another very long hot tube all the way forward to the head, my arms were cut, scraped, and badly bruised. It was a tough day. And overall, though, in some areas it was easy to shove that PEX through all on its own. Other places, it just would not go from one small hole in a bulkhead to the next small hole in a bulkhead. So I had to use this electrician's tape. And it's a very long, flat piece of metal on the spool that you can wind up just like a fishing reel. And it has a little hole through the end here, which I put a piece of string and then drilled a hole through the end of the PEX tubing, so I could shove this into the PEX and have this line coming out of each hole in the tubing, tie it up, and then reel it back through that long run. So this is really good for just shoving out and getting into tight places, attaching something to the very end, and then bringing it all back through. Okay, just imagine this is the barbed connector coming out of the top of the through hull valve. If Teflon tape is not wrapped around the threads and making the join into the valve, it is guaranteed to leak. So the Teflon tape should be wrapped around the threads about 5 times is what I normally do, and in a direction so when it is screwed into the valve, it'll be tightening with the wraps rather than pulling the wraps off of the threads of the connector. We don't need to put the Teflon tape on the connector going up to the water hose to the faucets, because those have O-rings, rubber O-rings to make the seal. Well, we have everything back together again. There's no leaks underneath the sink in the head. The through hull is patched up and back in its proper position. Underneath the drain in the head, we have the new mixing valve. We have the new mixing valve in the head. We have 3 out of 4 old copper tubes replaced with the PEX. We have the new mixing valve at the galley sink. No leaks anywhere in that area, so we're in very good shape. It certainly is not done to ABYC, American Boat and Yacht Council specifications, but it's the best that we can do out here in the field. Certainly it's on my list of things to keep an eye out for is PEX 2 copper tubing joins. And also, of course, we'll be mail ordering a new shutoff valve for that through hull underneath the sink and the head. Hey, but thanks a lot for watching. I hope this has been helpful for you. If it has, please click on the thumbs up down below and also the subscribe button. Hey, thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you soon.